No, 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 no.
Well, maybe it is that video then. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. It's only 10 minutes, so
Hey everyone, I know I don't discuss current events too often, but I'd like to do more of that, and there's one thing happening at the moment that I feel compelled to comment on. Everybody seems to be furious about trans people. Half of us are furious that
I mean, that's a great start, isn't it? Everyone's furious about trans people. Nice.
they exist, and the other half are furious about what the other half is saying. I would like to jump in and see if I can clear up some of the ways that people are talking past each other. Now, it's no secret that I'm a bit on the liberal side, but rest assured the left is not going to get away scot-free on this one. They're missing the mark on a few key points. But as tends to be the case, it's bigots on the right who are the main problem, so let's start there. The primary issue is people who deny transgenderism. These are the people who spew the tired Fox News talking points. Liberals say there are 89 genders and anyone can
Ironically, using talking points, but sure.
identify as a hamster, that sort of thing. It's a deliberate caricature of reality peddled by all the angry conservative dudes popping up in my feed lately who claim that nobody can define a woman. Let's all take a moment to acknowledge the problems that go along with the ambiguity of language. Sex and gender are different words that refer to different things. If you did not know that, now you do. Sex is a chromosomal phenomenon. Nearly all of us have 2 sex chromosomes in all of our somatic cells. If both are X, your sex is female. If one is X and one is Y, your sex is male. There are interesting exceptions, like intersex people who exhibit a blend of the phenotypes associated.
Yeah, because I mean, a problem here is like, let's say XXY. An XXY male, that would be someone with Klinefelters. They're not intersex, they're male. If you actually go through these and sort through them, you could, if you want, fit them into male and female. So you can still argue that sex is binary.
With the 2 sexes due to chromosomal irregularities, as well as chimeric beings who exhibit different genotypes in different cells due to developing from more than one zygote. It is important to discuss and understand these populations. However, we can still safely categorize the overwhelming majority of people as exhibiting either male or female sex. Gender is a different phenomenon. It is still biological, but it is a neurochemical construct. This means that ultimately it is still genetic in basis, but it absolutely is not determined merely by the sex chromosomes. It is tremendously more complicated, and researchers are still working to understand the—
Wait, gender is a neurochemical phenomenon. Gender is a social construct, is it not?
Gender is a different phenomenon. It is still biological, but it is a neurochemical—
Okay, we really need some kind of fucking consensus on what the fuck gender is. Is it a societal thing? Is it a social construct? Or is it something else? Like, fuck me. Because again, are we talking about gender identity? I'm not sure.
chemical construct. This means that ultimately it is still genetic in basis, but it absolutely is not determined merely by the sex chromosomes. It is tremendously more complicated, and researchers are still working to understand the biological basis of gender identity. Human psychology is—
Yeah, gender identity. We're using gender and gender identity as synonyms when they're not. And this is the problem, that like gender has become this umbrella term for all this other kind of shit. You know what I mean? Like, it was fine when talking about chromosomal sex. Like, what the fuck is this?
And researchers are still working to understand the biological basis of gender identity.
Because, like, how biological is it? I have a feeling that a lot of people, their experiences factor massively into, like, their gender identity. And that it's something they kind of, you know, they cognitively kind of come up with. I just don't see that it's, like, this innate thing where it's like, oh, well, actually, my gender identity is that I'm a woman. It's like, that just doesn't make any sense. And if it's not really... Like, I don't know, like, I guess the best way you can try and argue that gender is a biological thing is to go for, like, brains or something like that, but it just doesn't really hold water, you know what I mean?
Identity. Human psychology is complex. People need to deal with that. Thoughts—
Yeah, gender identity might be psychological. You could say that. Gender itself isn't psychological, though.
and feelings are ultimately chemical phenomena. We all have a neurochemical profile that guides how we think and feel, and part of that is gender identity. The reason that we are just now becoming a— that guides thoughts and feelings are ultimately chemical phenomena. We all have a neurochemical profile that guides how we think and feel, and part of that is gender identity.
Okay, I need a source for some of this shit, because, like, we're just rattling some other shit off. What is that sentence? I'm sorry, I'm rewinding a lot.
We all have a neurochemical profile that guides how we think and feel, and part of that is gender identity. The reason that we are just now becoming
Your gender identity is part of your neurochemical profile. Like, how would you even begin to show that?
equipped to differentiate between the two phenomena is that in the vast majority of humans, somewhere between 99 and 99.9% of all people, gender identity aligns with biological sex.
Okay, we're not explaining anything and just going on to like the cisgender thing. I mean, the cisgender, transgender thing is extremely imperfect. When lots of people erroneously come to the conclusion that they're trans and then change back later, or don't change back later and just end their life, you know. Just, this is like pseudoscience. What are we making up here? Oh, and the comments have been turned off. To see why the comments have been turned off, visit my response to Matt Walsh. Jesus fucking Christ. Was it trolls? There'll be some trolls. There'll probably be other people asking what the fuck half of this is.
Hence the term cisgender. Cis is a prefix that means same. But for that remaining fraction of a percent, which totals to millions and millions of people all over the world, their gender identity is the opposite of their biological sex.
Yeah, they haven't defined anything about gender identity. They haven't defined how it's like, what is it? It's like psychological or innate and not something that can be affected by outside forces that, you know, you watch a video that says, oh, you might be trans if this, that, and the other. And then you remember something from your past. Oh shit, I used to do that. Maybe I'm trans. That's not innate. That's like societal. That's like, you have to come up to that conclusion yourself. And like your thoughts and stuff, like, I firmly believe that people do have free thought. And if people have free thought, then how is gender identity innate when you're free to come up with whatever you want? You're free to have any theory you want about yourself, you know? I don't even know where I begin with it. This is dumb.
Sex, hence the term transgender.
This is as dumb as saying if I crash my car, it's a neurochemical phenomenon. Well, yeah, like, it's so bizarre.
Trans is a prefix that means opposite. The unfortunate linguistic coincidence is that we use terms like man and woman, or male and female, in describing both of these phenomena. That is where the confusion arises, when people insist that one term must encapsulate both phenomena at once. So when someone asks, what is a woman, expecting to get a very simple answer that children can understand, they are sorely mistaken.
Well, no, they're not, because you can just say that a woman is an adult human female, and that perfectly describes what a woman is. We've just made it more complicated because we want to satiate people's feelings. And I know, because I used to be one of them. I used to want my feelings satiated by being called a woman. I don't care anymore. I used to.
The answer requires a discussion of genetics and neurochemistry. Therefore,
well, you haven't shown any of the neurochemistry stuff, so you haven't shown why it deserves to be brought into the conversation at all. You haven't described what gender identity is. You haven't shown why it's a thing in the brain and not just, you know, people's like personal beliefs about themselves. Like, is being religious a neurochemical thing?
For when people complain about men choosing to be women, this is very offensive.
Well, the problem is you can choose your gender identity. How can you not? You can choose what your gender identity is because you come to a conclusion about it.
It is a denial of the concept of gender. It is no different than the conversation that was happening surrounding homosexuality a few decades ago.
Oh, he's hitting every dipshit fucking talking point himself.
Complain about men choosing to be women, this is very offensive. It is a denial of the concept of gender. It is no different than the
No, it's not. You're not denying the concept of gender by saying that a person can choose to decide they're the other gender, or however we're saying it. Like, that doesn't deny that gender exists. It perhaps denies gender exists how you put it across, but that's not what gender is anyway. Gender is a social construct.
Conversation that was happening surrounding homosexuality a few decades ago. Conservatives would say that homosexuality is just demons or temptations from Satan, and that heterosexuality
is being liberal or conservative a neurochemical thing?
Sexuality is the only way people can truly be. Today, this seems totally ridiculous.
Thank you, FixYNRS. Hope you're good. Sorry if I'm saying your name wrong. Thanks for watching.
because homosexuality and other sexual orientations have become accepted and normalized, even among many conservatives. The same will happen for transgenderism because it undeniably...
I don't think this is true. I think this is always going to be more contentious than homosexuality. Like, there's a lot of issues that come up around transgenderism that don't come around with homosexuality. Like, we used to have, I think the best we got really was that there used to be the kind of stereotypes, oh, if you go in the men's toilet in like a gay bar, you'll get bummed, which it never happened to me. I'm not aware of anyone that happened to. But with transgenderism, you're talking about males in female spaces. You're talking about like sports and stuff like that. This is extremely naive in my opinion. And this was made in 2022. This was, I think, a little before like the backlash started to come in. Like the backlash started coming in, I think, around the end of 2022. And this is like, yeah, it's always going to be more contentious. The idea that a man might want to have sex with other men instead of women. Then a man can become a woman. Because our understanding of women is typically that they're the one that carries the child, you know, makes the big gamete, and have certain traits in common that men don't have. And then men have certain traits in common that women don't have. This is not, hang on. Let me just get the thing again. But he's totally wrong with this. You really don't know this whatsoever. This is looking at something in history and assuming that because trans people have been force-teamed with LGBT people that we're going to have the same result. I don't think that's true at all.
And normalized, even among many conservatives. The same will happen for transgenderism because it undeniably exists.
Undeniably exists. What's your evidence that people say that they're trans? I don't know, man. You're gay if you fuck people that are the same sex as you. Oh my God.
The acceptance for suppressed sexual orientations came first because around 10% of people are gay, whereas a much smaller percentage of people are trans. But this is the natural...
And also, arguably, trans is a much more modern concept than gay. Like, it's a bit easier to say there's been gay people throughout history because all you have to do is ascertain that there were men that would sleep with other men, women that would sleep with other women. When it comes to trans, it's a lot more complicated because you're talking about someone's gender identity. And it's like, well, how do you show a gender identity? You can't. There's no behavior attached to being trans other than following different gender stereotypes, which doesn't really mean anything in and of itself. Someone fucks a man and they're a man and they're kind of gay, or at least bi, you know what I mean? Ty Rivera is proof of that. If someone like him has to make videos against Traore ideology, he thinks it'll come back on him. Yeah, maybe.
Progression of societal evolution. Nearly every binary has been shown to actually be a spectrum, and it doesn't matter how uncomfortable it makes conservative people.
Nearly every binary is actually a spectrum. Well, sex isn't really a spectrum.
Society will continue to shift until our language and policies reflect actual human nature, not the tiny pure...
Wait, what? God, everything he says is like... This is actually insufferable. What the fuck is this video?
And it doesn't matter how uncomfortable it makes conservative people. Society will continue to shift until our language and policies reflect actual human nature.
I don't think this is necessarily true either. Potentially science will never be that accurate to what's really going on. Like, we really don't know. And also, like, I'm kind of not surprised now seeing that vaush replied to this. Maybe I should have a quick look at that. Because he's very much on the language should be prescriptive and not descriptive. And this is saying society is not, can you see? Hang on. So you can see at the bottom.
Anti-trans.
Moving away from how people should be to what they are. This is kind of opposite to what a lot of these people say, you know? Oh, thank you for following. Paper Stream Desu. Stream Sedu, excuse me. Hope you're good. Yeah, I'm starting to see why some of the wokies don't like this either.
Not the tiny puritanical box that has historically been thrust upon us. Now, as promised with the indictment of conservatives complete, I turn to liberals and the missteps they are enacting that are preventing resolution. Number one, please stop saying things like gender is a social construct.
Why?
No, it is not. It is a biological construct. Society can't turn you trans and
I reckon you probably could manipulate someone into becoming gay. You can definitely manipulate someone into becoming trans. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for the subscribe. Paper Stream Sedu. Hope you're good. Yeah, like this is nuts. Don't remember Chris Chan? Oh, you're SDH. Oh, okay. Cool. Thank you. Yeah, society doesn't turn like Chris Chan literally went trans because someone put the idea in his head of like cross-dressing to try and attract women, and he fucking ran with it. Like, is this the best you can do? Like, gender is a social construct. I'm sorry, man. You've got to show how it isn't. You've just said that it's a biological thing without actually showing anything to support that. That Rachel Dolezal lady was transracial. Yeah, the other thing is, like, there's no satisfactory answer as to how transracial can't be a thing, but transgender can. Like, how is gender or sex this, like, special thing that works this way that nothing else works like? Tuning out income. Well, he's grown his hair out since then. He still has the beard, though, so I don't know. But then you can be a bearded lady, but you're male now, so... Oh, hi, Cam. I hope you're good.
No, it is not. It is a biological construct. Society can't turn you trans any more than it can turn you gay.
I very much think that you could probably convince someone to become gay when you're not gay. I feel like that slightly happened to me in a way when I was much younger. Like, because gay people actually paid more attention to me than I felt like straight people did. And because I felt I wasn't really good at like attracting women. Whereas like guys were a lot more forthright about it. Like I kind of did try and convince myself I was gay. Like I tried it out, it didn't work for me, and I kind of snapped out of it. But the thing about if gender isn't a social construct, then why do we gender like all kinds of products that are either masculine or feminine? What's that then? Do we need yet another word to talk about that kind of thing? Have I ever watched on stream anything about Chris Chan? I watched the body cam. I watched the body cam of his arrest, but that was about it. Like maybe I'll talk about Chris Chan a bit, but like I don't know, man. I'll think about it.
Gender is determined biologically. It is simply that, again, gender...
Yeah, he's just saying this without any actual, without anything.
...turn you gay. Gender is determined biologically. It is simply that, again, gender is not determined merely by the sex chromosomes and is an incredibly complex neurochemical phenomenon.
Like, this is just, oh, well, it's complicated, so we don't really understand, and therefore I don't actually have to explain this meaningfully. So what is the social construct of gender then? If that's not actually gender, then what is that?
Phenomenon. So let's talk about it honestly.
Like men's clothes and women's clothes. To me, that's like gender. But that's not what gender is according to this. So what is that then? It doesn't make any sense. You can't just not explain something and say, oh, it's incredibly complicated, so we don't know. You're taking it on value, on face value. That people can say, oh, I'm a woman, and therefore I'm a woman because of my gender in my brain, which is extremely complicated, so we can't question it. Like, it's just so stupid.
Gender roles are a social construct that all...
Gender roles, oh, okay. Well, gender roles specifically are yet another thing. What do I think is the difference between gender and sex? So sex is what you are, either male or female. To me, gender is like the social and like cultural aspects, like things like stereotypes, things that we associate more with men and women, hence masculine, feminine. So like things are gendered, like, you know, toys, like shower products, things like that are like gendered because they're kind of aimed at men or women. Like you've got, you know, the manufacturer will try and make a certain, what am I trying to say? Like association to get specifically men or specifically women to buy this, that, or the other. I think, like, obviously things like gender expression, gender roles are part of it. But I think also the way that you're perceived is part of it. And people don't like to talk about that because that suggests that other people can say what they think your gender is. But then your gender is whatever people see, is what they perceive. Your sex is like, you know, absolute. So I think gender is like subjective. It's like more subjective, like elements of sex, whereas sex is like an objective thing. At least in like the extreme, overwhelming vast majority of people. Maybe you've got the odd intersex person where it's genuinely difficult to tell whether they're male or female, but I don't know. Hopefully that answers.
All men must be this way and do these things, and all women must be this way and do these things, that is a social construct, and it is one that became obsolete immediately upon evolving
Well, they're not really obsolete.
Beyond a hunter-gatherer society. It has only persisted due to deeply rooted misogyny and the desire to treat women as private
This is so soy.
property. Rage against
Is that why it's persisted?
gender roles as a social construct all you like. I'm right there with you. But stop saying that gender itself is a social construct. It is biological.
Okay, he's made no argument as to why it's biological, but it's biological, so just trust me, guys, I guess.
In addition, sex is a much more easily definable biological construct, and we must acknowledge that when an individual that is of the male biological sex identifies as trans, their biological sex remains male.
How is it gender? How can your gender be female? If male and female are sex terms, how come gender adheres to sex terms? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And more to the point, like, so then why would your gender override your sex? It doesn't make any sense.
By identifying as trans, their chromosomes do not change, no matter what surgeries they choose to undergo. We rightfully refer to them as women because most of us have decided that it is appropriate for a society to respect their gender identity over their biological sex.
I actually hate this. This is like actually killing me. What the fuck is this?
That it is appropriate for a society to respect their gender identity over their biological sex as a linguistic formality. If one's sex is male and their gender is female, why not refer to them as female and address them as they wish?
Or why not just let people call you whatever the fuck they want? Why not just let people perceive people however they see them? Like, if you identify as a woman, but there are no observable traits of that whatsoever, then why should someone think this way? You know, I mean, why should someone respect someone wanting to be called something else? You don't have to go along with anything you don't want to. I think you can be socialized to believe you might be gay and comp het exists. However, conversion therapy was an epic fail, so homosexuality can't be really socialized out as easily. Yeah, I guess so. Hope you're good, Odes. Burning the Bible of woke and presenting an even dumber theory. Like, yeah, he's showing none of this. This is like really bad.
This is a simple and obvious courtesy, but their sex does not change, nor is their transgenderism selected. When liberals attempt to decouple gender or even sex from its biological basis, they give conservatives license for mockery, because they can then rightfully criticize what seems to them like a vague and meaningless declaration. That's why smug, ignorant conservatives
Instead of vague and ignorant, we've gone for, it's so complicated that I don't have to explain it, so you'll just have to trust me that this is true. So if gender is a social construct, then a trans person's identity is then a trans person's identity only valid in the society they're raised in? Well, potentially, yeah. If you go to a country where there's no such thing as trans people to them, you're just male or female, then you're not a woman anymore. If you're a trans woman, you know.
who make a living stirring up hatred amongst bigots get so much traction by cutting together cherry-picked compilations of young people saying silly things, like gender is
Why is that silly to say?
a social construct, because they get to go look at the dumb liberals, and it is a rare instance where they aren't completely wrong. This emboldens them and makes them feel justified in pushing other talking points that are completely wrong. And finally, on a cultural note, I think that we need to stop flipping out about innocuous things that comedians say. Let us reserve our anger for those who are in denial of science and are attempting to limit human rights. When someone attacks Dave Chappelle on stage in my town of Los Angeles,
Is it scientific to say that it's so complicated that we don't understand it, but then say that it must be real and everyone has to respect it. That doesn't sound very scientific to me, but I don't know.
Angeles in the wake of controversy surrounding alleged anti-trans rhetoric, and he, off the cuff, shouts, "It was a trans man." That's not a hateful remark. He was reacting to the situation, which is what comedians do. You are free to decide for yourself whether or not you find any particular comedy to be funny. Comedy is subjective, but whether or not something should be deemed offensive has an element of objectivity to it, and that remark does not qualify. I'm not here to do an in-depth analysis of all the alleged anti-trans jokes from all the comedians on Netflix, as I haven't even heard all of them, but in general, let's just tone it down a notch. Additionally, regarding the controversy with sports, trans women who have gone through puberty as males, experiencing the dramatic hormonal changes characteristic of any sexually dimorphic species, objectively have an unfair biological advantage over female athletes. I personally
Yeah, this is true.
couldn't care less about sports and who is competing against whom, but people who say that trans women have an unfair athletic advantage are absolutely correct. And to deny this makes any objections to transphobia totally...
I'll be honest. Listen, this whole video fucking sucks. There's so much dumb shit. But this is the way that you can say, I don't care about sports and not sound like a dickhead. Like, if you're saying, I don't really care about sports personally, but like saying that men don't have an advantage over women is silly, I can respect that. Listen, we found the gold in amongst the shit, I guess.
meaningless because you are refusing to acknowledge what trans people are. As to where trans women should compete...
Yeah, but you haven't defined what trans people are. You haven't given a good definition.
...phobia totally meaningless because you are refusing to acknowledge what trans people are. As to where trans women should compete...
I mean, look at this, like... Are we seeing a woman here? It's the most triangular fucking woman I've ever seen. It's just unconscionable.
I don't have any solutions because, again, I don't care about sports. But there is a reason that men and women do not compete with one another in almost any sport. So if you are a fan of sports, try to respect that. And that's the end of my rant, which I felt compelled to write down and say out loud because I'm tired of hearing about the persistent controversy where in my mind there should be none whatsoever. The main takeaway is that the world needs to get over the fact that trans people exist. They've always existed.
Well, that was insufferable. I just want to see... I'll have a quick look at what Vaush was saying.
Moment that I feel compelled to comment on. Everybody seems to be furious about trans people. Half of us are furious that they exist, and the other...
Oh my god. The most replayed. This was literally the bit I was like, shit, he's kind of going back, he's kind of pushing back against the vaushisms here. Where are we going from? We'll go from about here. I'm not going to spend too long on this.
When it comes to like social rights.
Ridiculous because homosexuality and other sexual orientations have become accepted and normalized, even among many conservatives. The same will happen for transgenderism because it undeniably exists. The acceptance for suppressed sexual orientations came first because around 10% of people are gay, whereas a much smaller percentage of people are trans. But this is the natural progression of societal evolution. Nearly every binary has been shown to actually be a spectrum, and it doesn't matter how uncomfortable it makes conservative people. Society will continue to shift until our language and policies reflect actual human nature, not the tiny puritanical box that has...
I like the sentiment here. The only thing that I disagree with is that he's framing this as though the existence of trans people is some kind of intrinsic biological reality that we need only accept and everything will be normal. The fact of the matter is that because gender is a social phenomenon, the fight will never end. The question as to what gender is acceptable, what gender presentations are hegemonic or normal or accepted, these aren't things that can be like answered once and then dealt with forever. They're questions that are always going to be coming up. They're going to be recursive. It's going to be discussed forever and ever and ever, you know?
I more or less agree.
So to give you guys an example over like gender, you know, or like some elements of gender that I think are worth thinking of. You know how gay people in the West have a gay lisp, you know? Like, not all of them, but a lot of them. Like, that's a thing, you know? That's not a coincidence. It's a very undeniable thing. You know what I mean? The gay accent. Why do you think that is? Like, really think about that for a second. Like, do you think that there's some kind of gene? Oh, but by the way, it doesn't happen to all gay people. It overwhelmingly happens to coastal gay people, and usually to the bottoms or the submissives. Isn't that weird? Like, is that a genetic thing? It's just like, oh yeah, some people are gay, and also...
I mean, my guess is they're around other gay people. Some of these gay people are like, what's the word? Feminized, you know?
the ones who happen to be near water and also happen to prefer taking it in the ass just happen to have like the list, you know? Not so much. The real reason for that is because people and people's identities tend to develop discursively as a product of the media they consume. There was an interesting documentary on this on MTV, where people at MTV recognized that they were creating the culture they were responding to. MTV executives had to create media that reflected the wishes of the youth, but the youth were building their wishes around what they saw on MTV. So MTV...
Kind of pivoting here, isn't the gay population less than that? I can't remember, to be clear. It seems quite high, but who knows? I remember some study people overestimate how many LGBT people there are. To be honest, I think there's way more bi people than we think. Myself. Always hovered around 10%. Hey, maybe. I'm not too knowledgeable on that. In the English-speaking world. Yeah. Like, British gay guys have a kind of stereotypical way of talking as well. But I mean, Aren't gay guys more likely to be a bit more kind of feminized in some way? I'm not sure. It's hard to explain. It kind of ties in a bit with how like trans people are more likely to be like LGB or something.
TV was in a feedback loop where they would create the trends that they would be expected to respond to. That's how a lot of cultural stuff goes. Same with gay lisps. When people realize that they're gay, or they have an inclination that they're gay, or they have a feeling, or they're kind of leaning in that direction, they become more comfortable with certain characteristics that throw them in that camp. It's not a coincidence that my stream, me being on stream, streaming here to a bunch of fucking gay people in my audience, has made me a little bit more campy in my day-to-day conversations as well. What you're exposed to will inform what you're comfortable with, and people want to fit into blocks because the block that you're in can tell other people how to treat you. If you're a gay guy who lives in a coastal area, that is to say, an area that's more likely to be urban and developed and progressive, and you're a bottom, and you know that bottoms often have lispy accents in media, and
Are we like slant kind of admitting that trans can be like socially contagious? I don't know, man.
you want to get railed in the ass, you want to communicate to other people that you're a bottom, so you adopt the accent. That's seriously it. Now, everything that I'm talking about right now is a component of self-identification that one could very easily refer to as a gender if they wanted. In fact, there are historic third genders that effectively are feminized men, you know, like that's what we would think of them today. There are modern day, like West Hollywood, lispy gays who, if they were like that in different cultures and different points of time, would probably be considered to be a third gender because their behavior is so distinct from typical male behavior. Yeah, Vermin, oftentimes it's not a conscious choice. These are just like reflections of cultural biases that people don't even have full control over. That's how much of a...
Yeah, because if he's saying that, then surely he would agree with me that like your gender identity can be very, very affected by what's on the outside and what you see. And you could watch videos about what it means to be trans and then start taking some of that on. You know what I mean? So like that kind of, to me, it seems like he kind of agrees with me that that your gender identity is not biological. It's something that can be very affected by the outside world. And thus, is it not more of a social thing?
victim we are to like cultural biases, you know? It has so much control over what we are and what we're interested in. You know, back in like imperial China, they thought it was beautiful for women to have tiny feet, so foot binding was a common practice. Does anyone in the modern world want women to bind their feet? Probably not, but millions did back then. Like, what is that? Is that genetics? No, of course not. People are attracted to what they're told to be attracted to. Whatever they're considered, you know, whatever they consider to be, you know, a valuable thing to pursue. That's what they tend to go for. It's, you know, yeah. Anyway, you understand what I'm getting at here, right? This is why I don't like referring to gender as like a psychological phenomena. Is being gay like at least in large part a psychological like brain neurons thing? Yeah, it is. Is being trans? I don't know. Gender dysphoria probably is at the very least, largely like a mental physiological brain chemistry thing. At least in part, I'd say. Not for everyone, but at least in part. But like so much gets layered on top of it, and there's so much of a variance depending on what cultural shit you're exposed to. I don't like referring to it as just like a science thing, like a biology thing.
Has historically been thrust upon us. Now, as promised, with the indictment of conservatives complete, I turn to liberals and the missteps they are enacting that are preventing resolution.
Uh-oh.
Number one, please stop saying things like gender is a social construct.
Oh no.
No, it is not. It is a biological
Listen. I'm more or less agreeing with vaush on a lot of this. Like, it can happen. It can happen.
construct. Society can't turn you trans any more than it can turn you gay. Gender is determined biologically. It is simply that, again, gender is not determined merely by the sex chromosomes and is an incredibly complex neurochemical phenomenon. So let's talk about it honestly. Gender roles are a social construct.
So gender roles are a social construct, but yeah, no, he's just wrong on this one. STEM Lord interpretation of sociology, unfortunately.
That all men must be this way and do these things.
Like there's a very simple defeater to this. If this is the case, then why is it that there are, then how do you explain non-binary people? Or how do you explain like different genders in different cultures? How do you explain two-spirit people with Native Americans or like third genders in like India or cultures all around the world? Like his model can't explain that. Because in his mind, there are two sexes with intersex exceptions and the gender is...
A good point. Has anyone taken a bunch of hydras and scanned their brains? It's always interesting how no one has ever really like scanned any of these people's brains to actually identify differences with them, but we just assume that that's what it is, and we just say, well, it's in the brain and it's complicated. Like, to me, the complicated thing is just a get out. It's just, well, it's complicated and we haven't finished working it out yet. But then, like, if that's the case, why are you so convinced that that's even the case? If we don't know much about this stuff, then how are you making these statements? It doesn't make any sense.
It's just what's like the gender corresponds to the sex. You know, there's nothing more than that.
Yeah, vaush wants to be a horse and then to fuck people as a horse and has like lolly or something, which is kind of gross, but I am basically agreeing with him on this video.
And all women must be this way and do these things. That is a social construct, and it is one that became obsolete immediately upon evolving beyond a hunter-gatherer society. It has only persisted due to deeply rooted misogyny and the desire to treat women as private property.
Okay, I think that's a based sentiment, but I don't actually like that because it implies that gender roles haven't evolved since hunter-gatherer times. Like, there's a lot of really complicated social research on the ways in which our understanding of what a man and a woman are have been directly informed by changing, like, industrial, economic, and political situations. Like, the idea of the modern, like, nuclear family is a very recent thing. The idea of the man being the breadwinner and the woman staying at home and taking care.
Okay, bored. Was there anything else interesting? See what you said about this bit and then the transports thing, and then we'll move on.
Human psychology is complex. People need to deal with that. Thoughts and feelings are ultimately chemical phenomena. We all have a neurochemical
Oh no. This is what happens when hard science majors talk about sociological phenomena. I'm going to let him go a little bit further.
profile that guides how we think and feel, and part of that is gender identity. The reason that we are just now becoming equipped to differentiate between the two phenomena is that in the vast majority of humans, somewhere between 99 and 99.9% of all people, gender identity aligns with biological sex, hence the term cisgender. Cis is a prefix that means same. But for that remaining fraction of a percent, which totals to millions and millions of people all over the world, their gender identity is the opposite of their biological sex, hence the term.
So this is basically like the male body, female brain talking point. Basically, like this is essentially just like a modern telling of a very old way of explaining.
Yeah, he's even correctly essentializing something. That is more or less what he's saying. And it's silly.
The existence of trans people, which is like, you know, yes, my body is male, but my brain is female, like that kind of thing, you know? This is a pretty outdated talking point in large part because...
It's not outdated.
Okay, well, there are...
It's not outdated anymore. Holy shit, Vaush, you need to start looking at some of your understudies. Like people like that Mike Brigandy guy. People like fucking Powered by Rainbows. This shit is coming back. Do you know why it's coming back, though? The problem is, there aren't any other good explanations as to why people are trans. So we have to go back to that kind of thing. Because the brain is something that we can make into something so complicated that we can get around this kind of thing. But it only works as like a metaphor. All right, let's just go on to he mentions transports. I don't care about Dave Chappelle.
All the comedians on Netflix, as I haven't even heard all of them. But in general, let's just tone it down a notch. Additionally, regarding the controversy with sports, trans women who have gone through puberty as male...
I think it's okay to criticize comedians when to millions of people they say they support hate movements. I think that's okay. Maybe that's me being super sensitive.
Did he say that at any point in time? I don't think he did.
Males experiencing the dramatic hormonal changes characteristic of any sexually dimorphic species objectively have an unfair biological advantage over female athletes.
Well, that depends on a couple of factors, actually. That would depend, A, on whether or not they really did undergo a male puberty, because hormone blockers are a thing. If that's the case, then they're pretty much equal playing field, I believe. And B, whether or not hormones have
I don't know if that's true.
had a sufficient, have sufficiently lowered down the positive effects that you would get from higher androgen sensitivity when you were younger experiencing.
I mean, this kind of thing is true, but then it becomes, well, okay, so what, we should let certain males into women's sports and then others not into women's sports? How do you do that? Would it not just make more sense to make that split? And if they're not very androgenized, they've probably been playing sports around guys and getting their fucking ass kicked, depending on what it is. So, I don't know, man.
Puberty.
I personally couldn't care less about sports and who is competing against whom, but people who say that trans women have an unfair athletic advantage are absolutely correct. And
With like big giant asterisks there. I don't know why we're simplifying stuff. Why was the first third of this video him saying that everyone doesn't understand the complexity, but a lot of this is like very like I've spent 2 minutes thinking about it stuff, you know?
to deny this makes any objections to transphobia
It's kind of true, I've got to say.
totally meaningless because you are refusing to acknowledge what trans people are.
Excellent, yes. You can't have an issue with bigotry against a group if you're potentially wrong on some like very minor edge case issue. All of your objections to transphobia are invalid.
As to where trans women should compete, I don't have any solutions because, again, I don't care about sports. But there is a reason that men and women do not compete with one another in almost any sport. So if you are a fan of sports, try to respect that. And that's the end of my rant, which I felt compelled to write.
There we go. Vaush is right about something. I knew I'd find it. I knew I'd find it if I looked long enough. Yeah, I thought that Professor Dave video was fucking terrible. Maybe I'll look at the King Critical thing one day. Isn't Vaush the dude that supports people owning CP? I've no idea. He said some, like... He's always said, like, he's always done the kind of pedo sophistry shit. And then he got caught with, like, Lolly, sorry, he would be a lolicon. He's been caught with Lolly on his computer, which kind of contextualized those prior statements as seeming a bit dodgy. So he gets called a pedophile a lot, and it's like, well, don't know. I'm not typically a fan of Vaush, but I mean, he's watching a video that I think is pretty cooked. So if he's gonna get me on his side on anything, it's gonna be something like this, because I think this Professor Dave video actually sucks. Like, doesn't make any sense. Yeah, there we go. Fun tangent. Maybe I'll look at the King Critical video one day, but probably not on stream. Like, I don't watch people like King Critical on stream because I just sit here agreeing for the most part.